First encounter. A deadly mistake. The sky was burning. Captain Ray Carter groaned as he pulled himself out of the wreckage. His dropship had crashed on an unknown planet, the flames flickering against the metallic surface of the broken craft. His helmet display was glitching, and his communication system was dead. He was alone. He checked his gear. His rifle was damaged, but his sidearm still worked. His suit had a few scratches, but it would hold. He took a deep breath and looked around. The land was strange. The air smelled metallic, and the ground was covered in a dark, moss-like substance. Giant trees with glowing blue veins stretched high above, their twisted branches reaching towards the sky. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, like whispers carried by the wind. Ray knew one thing: he was not supposed to be here. His mission was simple. A recon team had gone missing, and his squad was sent to find them. But before they could land, an unseen force had attacked them. Missiles came out of nowhere, tearing through their ships. Now he was the only one left. Or so he thought. A sudden movement. Ray turned, his instincts kicking in. He barely had time to react before a shadow lunged at him from the trees. A figure, fast and deadly, slammed into him, sending him rolling across the rough ground. His weapon flew from his grip. He barely dodged as a sharp blade slashed inches from his throat. Ray rolled to his feet, drawing his combat knife. His attacker was quick, too quick. They moved like a ghost, barely making a sound. Then the figure stepped into the light. It was a girl, an alien girl. She had deep violet skin, glowing silver eyes, and dark patterns running along her arms. Her silver-white hair was tied back, revealing sharp, angular features. She wore a form-fitting combat suit, and in her hand was a sleek, curved blade that pulsed with energy. Ray could see the way she moved, like a trained warrior. This was no ordinary alien. She was hunting him. Without hesitation, she attacked again. Ray barely blocked her strike, but the force sent shockwaves up his arm. She was strong, faster than any human. He tried to speak, but she didn't give him a chance. Another strike, a spinning kick, a precise slash. Ray dodged, countered, but he was struggling. She was better, stronger, but he had one advantage: experience. As she swung again, Ray faked a stumble. She took the bait, closing in to finish him. At the last moment, he twisted, grabbing her arm and using her own momentum against her. She gasped as he flipped her, pinning her to the ground. For the first time, their eyes met. For a brief second, there was silence. He could feel her breath, see the hatred in her silver eyes. But behind that rage, he saw something else: fear. Before he could speak, a strange sound filled the air. A deep, rumbling growl. Ray's instincts screamed at him. Something was coming. The alien girl's eyes widened. She twisted under his grip and kicked him back with incredible force. He stumbled, rolling to his feet, but she wasn't attacking anymore. Instead, she was looking past him. Ray turned. From the shadows of the forest, something massive stepped forward. It was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. Twice the size of a man, with dark, armored skin and razor-sharp limbs. Its multiple eyes glowed red, and its jagged mouth dripped with a thick, black liquid. The ground shook as it moved closer. Ray gritted his teeth. He didn't know what this thing was, but he knew one thing: it was a predator, and they were its prey. The alien girl took a defensive stance. Ray did the same. For a moment, they stood side by side, facing the same enemy. The creature roared in charge. Ray raised his weapon. The alien girl tightened her grip on her blade. For now, their battle would have to wait. They had a bigger problem. Prisoner of the enemy. Darkness. Captain Ray Carter's head throbbed as he drifted back to consciousness. His body ached, his arms felt heavy, and his vision blurred. A low humming sound vibrated in the air around him. As his senses slowly returned, he realized He wasn't lying on the ground anymore. He was suspended in the air. Ray's eyes snapped open. He was inside a strange, dimly lit chamber, metallic walls pulsing with a faint blue glow. His arms were shackled above his head, his legs restrained by an invisible force. The air was thick with an alien scent, like burnt metal and something unnatural. Where the hell am I? Then he remembered. The creature. The monstrous predator had charged at them in the forest, its glowing red eyes filled with hunger. He and the alien girl, his enemy, had stood side by side. They had no choice but to fight together. For a moment, they had moved as one. She had danced with deadly grace, her energy blade slicing through the beast's armored hide, while Ray had fired precise shots into its weak spots. They had almost won. Almost. Then reinforcements had arrived, but not his. The alien girl's people had surrounded them in an instant, dozens of sleek, dark-armored soldiers wielding energy weapons. The last thing he remembered was a sharp pain in his neck and his body collapsing. Now he was their prisoner. A sound pulled him from his thoughts, the soft hiss of a door opening. Ray turned his head as she stepped into the chamber. The alien girl. She was no longer in her battle armor. Instead, she wore a fitted dark blue uniform, intricate silver patterns running across the fabric. Her silver-white hair was still tied back, but her expression had changed. She no longer looked like a warrior ready to kill. She looked curious. She stopped a few feet away, arms crossed. "You fight well," she said, her voice smooth yet firm. "For a human." Ray smirked, despite the pain in his body. "And you kidnap well." "For an alien." Her silver eyes narrowed. "You were trespassing on our land. Your people invaded our world. Tell me, why shouldn't I kill you right now?" Ray inhaled slowly, trying to think. His usual strategy in situations like this was to talk his way out, stall for time. But this was different. He was on an unknown planet, surrounded by an enemy he knew nothing about. If he made one wrong move, he'd never leave this place alive. "Maybe because I saved your life back there," Ray finally said. "That thing would have eaten you if I hadn't stepped in." She tilted her head, unimpressed. "I had it under control." "Sure you did," he said, rolling his shoulders against the restraints. "So what now? You torture me for information. Use me as a science experiment." The girl studied him for a moment. Then she turned away, pacing the room. "My name is Zyra," she said, almost reluctantly. "And we don't need to torture you. We already know why your people are here." Ray frowned. "Oh yeah? Enlighten me." Zyra stopped, looking over her shoulder. "You humans came to steal from us. To take what is not yours. Just like before." Ray's confusion deepened. "Before? What the hell are you talking about?" She walked closer, her silver eyes piercing. "You really don't know, do you?" Ray shook his head, frustration creeping in. "I was sent on a rescue mission. My team was ambushed before we even landed. I don't know anything about your people or your war. But I do know something else was out there. Something dangerous. And it wasn't us." For the first time, Zyra hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. Then, before she could respond, the room shook. A deep, rumbling explosion roared through the walls. The blue lights flickered. Somewhere outside, distant shouts echoed, followed by the rapid sound of weapons charging up. Zyra's expression darkened. Ray tensed. "That doesn't sound normal." Zyra cursed in her own language and turned to a nearby control panel. She pressed a series of glowing symbols, and a small screen appeared in midair. Ray could see the display clearly. It showed the outside, a large underground base built into the rocky terrain. Sleek alien ships lined the hangars, and strange, insect-like machines patrolled the perimeter. But something else was there now. A shadowy, monstrous form crawled along the outer walls of the base. No, not one. Dozens. The same creatures from the forest. Void crawlers. They moved with terrifying speed, their glowing red eyes scanning for prey. Their razor-sharp limbs tore through the defenses, cutting down Zyra's soldiers like they were nothing. The once strong fortress was falling apart. Zyra's hands clenched into fists. "How did they find us?" she whispered. Ray felt his stomach drop. They had been captured, restrained, brought underground, and now the enemy had arrived, right at their doorstep. He looked at Zyra. She looked back at him. They both knew the truth. The real enemy wasn't each other. It was them. Zyra inhaled sharply. Then, to Ray's complete surprise, she pressed another button. His restraints unlocked. He dropped to the floor, catching himself on one knee. He looked up at her in shock. Zyra tossed him a small energy blade, her expression hard. "You saved my life once, human," she said. "Let's see if you can do it again." Ray grinned, flipping the blade in his hand. "Now we're talking." Outside, the void crawlers let out a deafening screech. The battle had begun. A common enemy. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Captain Ray Carter clenched the energy blade Zyra had given him, his fingers tightening around the unfamiliar weapon. The eerie red glow of the void crawlers pulsed through the underground chamber, flashing across the smooth metallic walls like a warning. The alien fortress, which had once felt so impenetrable, now shuddered as the monstrous creatures tore through its defenses. The battle had already begun outside. Screams and rapid bursts of energy weapons filled the air, distant but growing closer. Ray turned to Zyra. She stood rigid, her silver eyes fixed on the security screen displaying the invasion. He could see the barely hidden tension in her posture. This wasn't just an attack. This was an extermination. "You fought these things before?" Ray asked, breaking the silence. Zyra exhaled sharply, gripping her curved blade. "Many times, and each time, we barely survived." Ray frowned. "Then why the hell are they attacking now?" She turned to him, her eyes filled with something close to anger. "That's what I want to know, human." The way she said it sent a prickle of irritation through Ray, but he didn't have time to argue. The creatures were coming. He could hear them now, scraping claws against the metal vents, skittering movements in the air ducts above. A heavy thud echoed from outside the door. Then another. Then silence. Ray and Zyra exchanged a look. "Tell me you have a plan," Ray muttered, shifting his grip on the blade. Zyra inhaled deeply, then pressed a panel on the wall. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing two sleek alien firearms. She grabbed one and tossed the other to Ray. He caught it instinctively, inspecting the weapon. The design was foreign, but it was intuitive. Point and shoot. Zyra moved toward the door. "We get to the command center. If we lose control of that, the entire fortress falls." Ray let out a breath. "Great. Simple. I love it." Then the door exploded. A massive void crawler lunged through the smoke, its spiked limbs slamming into the floor where Ray had stood a second earlier. He rolled to the side, raising his stolen weapon, but Zyra was faster. She launched herself forward, blade flashing in the dim light. Her strike was precise, slicing through the creature's thick exoskeleton. The void crawler screeched, but it didn't go down. Instead, it whipped around, striking her with its spiked tail. Zyra was fast, but not fast enough. The impact sent her flying backward, slamming into the wall with a grunt. Ray cursed and fired, the alien weapon kicking against his palm as bright blue energy sizzled through the air. The shot struck the crawler's side, burning through its armored plates. The creature let out a piercing shriek, staggering slightly. That was all the opening Ray needed. He sprinted forward, driving Zyra's energy blade straight into its throat. A sickening hiss filled the chamber as dark fluid spurted from the wound. The void crawler twitched, its red eyes flickering wildly before it finally collapsed with a heavy thud. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ray exhaled, yanking the blade free. "Damn," he muttered, wiping alien blood from his face. These things don't go down easy. Zira groaned as she pushed herself up. Now you understand why we fear them. Ray offered her a hand. She hesitated, then took it, pulling herself to her feet. For the first time, her gaze wasn't filled with hostility. Just understanding. But they didn't have time to reflect. The distant echoes of battle were getting closer. Zira clenched her jaw. We need to move. Now. A battle through the ruins. The underground fortress had turned into a war zone. Ray and Zira sprinted through the dimly lit corridors, dodging debris and the bodies of fallen soldiers. The once sleek halls were now scorched with battle damage, and flickering emergency lights cast eerie shadows along the walls. Every corner they turned, they faced more crawlers. Ray's heart pounded as he took down one after another, the alien weapon becoming an extension of his body. Zira fought beside him, her blade carving through the creatures with terrifying precision. Despite everything, they were working together. Ray wasn't sure if it was instinct or some strange understanding between them, but they moved in sync, covering each other, anticipating attacks, adapting to the other's fighting style. He'd never fought like this with anyone before, but it still wasn't enough. The crawlers kept coming. They're pushing us back, Ray shouted over the chaos. Zira's face was grim. They're not just attacking. They're hunting us. As if to confirm her words, a monstrous howl filled the air. Then the walls cracked. Ray barely had time to react before the ceiling caved in, metal and debris raining down around them. He threw himself backward, barely avoiding the collapse. Dust and smoke choked the air. When it cleared, his stomach dropped. A massive figure stood in the wreckage, a void crawler unlike any they had seen before. Twice the size, thicker armor, sharper claws, its glowing red eyes locked onto them. Zira tensed. That's a hiveborn. Ray swore under his breath. Let me guess. Bigger, meaner, harder to kill. Zira nodded. And it never fights alone. As if on cue, more crawlers crawled out from the cracks, their grotesque forms moving like a shadowy tide. Ray gritted his teeth. They were running out of time. Can we make it to the command center? He asked. Zira hesitated, just a second. But that was enough. No, they wouldn't make it. Not like this. She tightened her grip on her blade, looking at Ray with something close to resignation. You wanted a plan. Ray frowned. Yeah. She exhaled sharply. Then listened carefully. We split up. Ray's eyes widened. Are you insane? That thing will rip you apart. Zira's gaze was cold, but there was something behind it. Trust. I can lead them away, she said. You can still make it. Find my people. Tell them what's coming. Ray clenched his fists. No way. I'm not leaving you to die. Zira smirked, just barely. I thought humans didn't care about aliens. Ray sighed, glancing at the hiveborn. It was watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then he looked back at Zira. They weren't just enemies anymore. They weren't just allies. They were survivors. And they weren't done yet. Ray took a deep breath. We do this together. No one dies today. Zira's smirk widened. Then she charged. Ray followed. The battle for survival had just begun. The Great Escape. The world was burning. Captain Ray Carter sprinted through the wreckage of the alien fortress, his breath ragged, his grip tight around the sleek alien firearm. Behind him, Zira moved with deadly precision, her glowing blade slashing through the shadowy creatures that pursued them. They had barely escaped the hiveborn. For a moment, it had felt impossible, outnumbered, outgunned, hunted. But against all odds they had survived. Not because of luck, not because of fate, because they had fought together. But now, survival wasn't enough. They needed a way out. The underground corridors twisted in a maze of destruction. Fires raged along the walls, sending flickering shadows stretching across the metallic floors. The alarms had long since died, replaced by the distant screams of Zaira's people. The fortress was falling, and if they didn't move fast, they would fall with it. Ray skidded to a stop, his eyes darting between the branching paths ahead. Where the hell are we going? Zaira didn't hesitate. The hangar. If any ships are still intact, we take one. Ray exhaled sharply. You mean steal one? She gave him a sharp look. Your people stole from us first. Not me, Ray shot back. I didn't even know this planet existed before today. Zaira hesitated, just for a moment. But that second of doubt was enough. A void crawler lunged from the shadows. Ray barely had time to react before the creature slammed into him, its jagged claws raking across his armor. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. The creature reared back, preparing to tear into him. Then a silver blur sliced through the air. Zaira's blade sank deep into the monster's neck, and with a sharp twist, she tore through its flesh. The crawler let out a gurgling screech before collapsing beside Ray, its dark blood hissing against the floor. Zaira extended a hand. You're slowing me down, human. Ray groaned, taking her hand as she hauled him up. Yeah. Next time, I'll let you get tackled instead. She smirked, just barely. Then she turned and ran. Ray followed. The betrayal. The hangar was chaos. Sleek alien ships lined the massive chamber, some burning, some already stolen by desperate soldiers trying to escape. The sound of gunfire and void crawler shrieks filled the air. And then Ray saw them. A group of Zaira's people, high-ranking soldiers, standing near the last functional warship. Ray's instincts screamed danger. Zaira slowed beside him, her expression shifting from urgency to something colder. They're waiting for me, she said. Ray frowned. That's a good thing, right? Zaira didn't answer. Instead, she walked forward. Slowly, cautiously. Ray followed, keeping his weapon ready. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, a tall alien male with deep violet skin and a long scar across his cheek. His dark armor was covered in battle scars, his silver eyes scanning Zaira with something between pride and suspicion. Commander Zaira, the man said, his voice heavy with authority. You survived. Zaira nodded. We need to evacuate. The fortress is lost. The soldier's gaze flickered toward Ray. His expression hardened. And yet you stand with a human. Ray tensed. He had seen this look before, the kind that didn't lead to happy endings. Zaira's jaw clenched. He saved my life. The soldier's face remained unreadable. And did you forget what they did to us? Did you forget the war they started? Ray frowned. I keep hearing about this war. But funny thing, I was never part of it. The soldier ignored him. You are either with us or against us, Zaira. Ray saw the trap before Zaira did. The moment she hesitated, the soldiers raised their weapons. Betrayal. Zaira's own people had already decided. She had fought beside a human. She had trusted him. And for that, she was no longer one of them. Ray inhaled sharply. He had seen this before. In every war, in every battlefield, the same pattern. People blinded by hatred. People turning on their own. Zaira's fingers curled around her blade. Don't do this, she said, her voice lower now. Dangerous. The soldier tilted his head. You made your choice. Then he fired. Fight or die. Ray moved first. He shoved Zaira to the side as the energy blast whizzed past her, barely missing her head. The next second, the hangar exploded into chaos. Ray fired, taking down one of the soldiers before he could react. Zaira spun, her blade slicing through another's throat in a fluid motion. But they were outnumbered. Shots rained around them, sparks flying as metal scorched. Zaira ducked behind a fallen piece of debris, her breathing sharp. They won't stop, she said. Ray pressed against the cover beside her. Yeah, I got that. Ideas. Zaira's eyes flickered toward the warship, the last remaining escape vessel. "If we can reach it," she said, "we get out of here. Otherwise, we die." Ray let out a breath. Great pep talk. Then, before she could stop him, he ran. The last flight. Ray sprinted across the battlefield, dodging gunfire, sliding between debris. Zira was beside him, her blade flashing through the air, cutting down anyone who got too close. The warship was right there. Then the Hiveborn arrived. The monstrous void crawler smashed through the hangar doors, its glowing red eyes locking onto them. Ray's stomach dropped. They were out of time. Zira didn't stop. She leaped onto the warship's loading ramp, reaching for the controls. Ray followed, firing wildly to cover their escape. The Hiveborn charged, its massive claws tearing through the ground. 1 second. 2 seconds. Zira slammed the controls. The warship's engines roared to life. The Hiveborn lunged. Ray jumped. The ramp began to close. The warship lifted from the ground, fire bursting from its thrusters. And in the last moment, the Hiveborn's claws barely missed them. Then the fortress collapsed. The warship shot into the sky, the explosion below swallowing everything. Ray slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Zira sat across from him, her expression unreadable. They had escaped. But the war wasn't over. Not even close. The hidden truth. The warship cut through the darkened sky, leaving behind the burning remains of the fortress. The stars stretched endlessly above, cold and distant, as if indifferent to the battle that had just taken place below. Inside the cockpit, Captain Ray Carter leaned against the metal walls, still catching his breath. His muscles ached, his clothes were stained with blood. Some his, some not, and his mind raced with everything that had happened. Zira sat across from him, silent. Her silver eyes stared out the viewport, her grip tight around the controls. She hadn't spoken since they'd taken off. Her own people had turned on her. She had been their commander, their warrior. But the moment she hesitated, the moment she chose to fight alongside a human, they had seen her as a traitor. Ray exhaled and looked around the ship. It was sleek, alien in design, but strangely familiar. Every cockpit followed the same basic rules, even across species. The controls were still glowing, displaying unknown symbols that flickered like warnings. The ship had taken a hit during the escape. He turned his gaze back to Zira. "You okay?" She didn't look at him. "We need to keep moving." Ray frowned. He recognized avoidance when he saw it. Zira. Her fingers twitched on the controls. Then she finally looked at him. And for the first time, Ray saw something he hadn't seen before. Doubt. She was always so composed, so sure of herself. Even when they were fighting, even when they were outnumbered and hunted, she never hesitated. But now she looked lost. "I don't know where to go," she admitted, her voice quieter than he'd ever heard it. Ray blinked. "What do you mean? You're the one flying the ship." She shook her head. "No. Before this, I knew who I was. I knew my mission. I knew my enemy." She turned her gaze back toward the stars. "Now, I have nothing." Ray leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Yeah, well, welcome to my world." Zira's eyes flickered toward him, curious. Ray sighed, glancing at the floor. "I lost my squad. My mission went to hell. And now I'm stuck in the middle of a war I don't understand." He gave a dry chuckle. "But you know what's worse? The fact that I'm starting to think this war is a lie." Zira's expression hardened. "A lie?" Ray nodded. "Your people think humans started it. My people think you started it. But neither of us actually know why we're fighting." He met her gaze. "Doesn't that seem weird to you?" Zira was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she exhaled. "I was raised to believe that humans were our enemies, that we were fighting to protect our world." Ray tilted his head. "And now?" She hesitated. And that was all the answer he needed. The signal. Before she could respond, an alarm blared across the cockpit. Zira snapped back to focus, her hands flying across the controls. Something's intercepting our ship's systems. Ray immediately reached for his weapon. More of your people. Zira shook her head. No, this is something else. Something old. The ship's screens flickered. Then, out of nowhere, a distorted voice crackled through the speakers. This is not your war. Ray's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Zira, but she was just as frozen as he was. The voice continued, deep and layered, like it was coming from something far away. You are pawns, blind soldiers. The war was never yours to fight. Ray swallowed hard. Who the hell is this? The ship's lights flickered, and suddenly, coordinates appeared on the screen. Zira's breath hitched. That's impossible. Ray looked at her. What? She stared at the glowing numbers, her voice barely above a whisper. This is where it all started. The origin of the war. Zira pulled the ship out of its course and locked onto the new coordinates. Ray didn't argue. His instincts told him this was important. As they entered hyperspace, Zira turned toward him, her expression tense. There's something I never told you, she admitted. Ray raised an eyebrow. Oh, good, because we totally need more secrets right now. She ignored his sarcasm. Before the war, there was a planet, a place where both our people once lived. It was neutral ground, a shared colony. Ray blinked. Wait, humans and your kind lived together. She nodded. Before the war, yes. It was an experiment in peace. But then, something happened. A disaster. A massacre. The colony was destroyed. Both sides blamed each other. And then the war began. Ray leaned back. And let me guess, nobody actually knows who fired the first shot. Zira shook her head. No. The records were lost. Erased. Ray clenched his fists. That's not a coincidence. Zira's expression was grim. No, it's not. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then, the ship shuddered as they came out of hyperspace. The moment they looked out the viewport, Ray felt his breath catch. The graveyard. They had arrived above a dead planet, or what was left of one. The surface was scared, broken apart, as if something had shattered it from the inside. Pieces of land floated in the void, fragments of cities barely visible beneath layers of dust and ice, and surrounding the planet, wreckage. Thousands of abandoned warships from both sides, frozen in space, drifting endlessly like a forgotten graveyard. Ray swallowed hard. This is where it started. Zira nodded, her voice hollow. Yes. Ray exhaled. Then I guess we're about to find out the truth. The descent. As Zira guided the ship down, a warning flashed across the screen. Warning. Unknown signalDTZTED. Ray gritted his teeth. Something's still here. Zira tightened her grip on the controls. Then we're not alone. The ship descended into the broken remains of the world, and whatever was waiting for them below had been waiting for a long time. A desperate plan. The planet was dead. Captain Ray Carter stared out of the ship's viewport as they descended through the thick, dust-filled atmosphere. Beneath them, broken ruins stretched across the barren landscape, remnants of a forgotten war. Jagged skyscrapers, half buried under layers of ash and ice, loomed like tombstones, the wreckage of thousands of ships, human and alien alike, drifted in the sky, their hollowed remains casting eerie shadows across the frozen wasteland. It wasn't just a battlefield. It was a mass grave. Zira piloted the ship with a tense grip, her silver eyes fixed on the coordinates they had received. The mysterious voice, the one that had told them the war was a lie, had led them here. But why? Ray had a sinking feeling in his gut. He had seen too many battlefields, too many cover-ups, to believe this was just another abandoned ruin. Something was waiting for them, and it wasn't friendly. The descent into shadows. The ship trembled as it broke through the thick clouds, the scanners flashing red warnings. Radiation levels increasing. Structural instability detected. Unidentified energy signature detected. Then, without warning, the systems shut down. The lights flickered, and the ship's thrusters stalled. A deep mechanical hum filled the air, vibrating through the metal frame. Ray's instincts screamed ambush. "We just lost power," he muttered, reaching for his weapon. Zira gritted her teeth, gripping the manual controls. "Something is pulling us in." The ship lurched downward, caught in an unseen force. The ground rushed toward them. The ruins blurred past the viewport as the warship spiraled. "Brace for impact," Zira shouted. Ray barely had time to grab onto the nearest support before the ship slammed into the ground. The impact sent a shockwave through the cockpit. Metal groaned, sparks flew, and dust erupted in every direction. The force threw Ray against the controls, pain exploding across his ribs. Then, silence. For a long moment, all he could hear was the distant howling of the wind. Then Zira groaned beside him. That was unpleasant. Ray coughed, shaking off the dizziness. "Yeah. Next time, let's not follow creepy ghost signals into death planets." Zira ignored him, unbuckling herself and grabbing her blade. "The ship's dead. We need to move." Ray checked his weapons. The energy rifle was still functional, but his sidearm's power cell was flickering. "Where exactly are we?" Zira pointed toward the cracked, frozen landscape ahead. The signal came from there. Ray followed her gaze. In the distance, partially buried under the ruins, stood a massive, circular structure. Unlike the other buildings, this one wasn't destroyed by war. It looked untouched, ancient, and the closer he looked, the more he realized it wasn't alien. It was human. Ray's blood ran cold. "What the hell is that?" Zira's jaw tightened. "I think we're about to find out." The truth beneath the surface. The entrance was sealed. A thick steel door, covered in dust and frost, stood before them. The markings on the surface were worn but still visible, human military insignia. Ray ran a hand over the faded symbol. This was a human base. Zira narrowed her eyes. "Impossible. We were told this was neutral ground." Ray exhaled. "Yeah. Well, someone lied." Before they could question it further, a beep echoed from the door. Then, it opened. Ray instinctively raised his weapon, stepping back as the heavy steel slid aside with a deep hiss. Beyond it, a dark hallway stretched into the unknown, flickering emergency lights casting faint shadows along the metal walls. It was operational. Someone, or something, was still here. Zira glanced at him. "We go in together." Ray nodded. "No arguments here." They stepped inside. The forgotten experiment. The facility was silent. Dust floated in the dim light, particles dancing in the stale air. The walls were lined with old terminals, some still faintly glowing, their cracked screens displaying half-decayed data logs. The deeper they moved, the stronger the feeling of wrongness grew. Then they reached the main chamber, and the truth hit them like a bullet. At the center of the room, inside a massive containment tank, something floated. Not human, not alien. Something else. Ray's heart pounded as he stepped closer. The creature inside was humanoid, but its skin was a metallic sheen of deep blue, its veins pulsing with an unnatural glow. Its eyes, closed now, looked disturbingly human, but its elongated limbs and sharp bone structure suggested something more. Then Zira saw the logs. She approached a flickering terminal, wiping the dust away. The words on the screen sent chills down her spine. "Project Genesis, NITATE, year 2174. Objective Biological Enhancement Program. State US, Thuramian ATD." Ray read over her shoulder, his expression darkening. This wasn't a research base. He turned toward the containment tank. This was a lab. Zira's hands clenched. They were creating something. Ray looked back at the figure in the tank. No, not creating. Modifying. The realization settled like ice in his chest. The war, the entire conflict between their species, wasn't about territory. It wasn't about survival. It was about covering up whatever happened here. And someone had made damn sure nobody would ever find out. Then, the tank cracked. A deep mechanical hiss filled the room. Ray took a step back, raising his rifle. That's probably not good. Zira drew her blade. Be ready. The glass shattered. And the thing inside opened its eyes, awakening the monster. The creature took its first breath. Its gaze flickered between Ray and Zira, a recognition sparking in its unnatural glowing pupils. Then its body twitched as if relearning how to move. Ray's grip tightened. I don't suppose we can talk this out. The creature blinked. Then it moved, faster than anything Ray had ever seen. It lunged forward, smashing into the metal floor with enough force to shake the entire room. Ray barely dodged, rolling to the side as Zira struck with her blade. The weapon **** sliced through its skin. ***, but the wound closed instantly. Ray cursed. Oh, that's just not fair. The creature turned its head toward him, eyes narrowing. Then, in a voice that sent chills through his spine, it spoke. You shouldn't be here. Then the alarm screamed. Warning. Containment reached. DTKTTE. Outside the base, something stirred beneath the ice. Something much bigger. Ray glanced at Zira. Run. Zira exhaled. Run. They bolted as the facility began to wake up. The past wasn't just waiting for them. It was hunting them. The final battle. A bond beyond war. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Captain Ray Carter and Zira sprinted through the collapsing facility, alarms screaming in their ears. Behind them, the shattered containment chamber crackled with energy, and from its ruins, the creature emerged. It wasn't just awake. It was aware. Ray's pulse pounded as he glanced back. The humanoid experiment, the Genesis subject, stood in the wreckage of its glass prison, its glowing, unnatural eyes watching them. It didn't move to chase them. It didn't attack. It simply stared. As if it was waiting. Zira's voice snapped him back to reality. We have to get out of here. Now. Ray didn't argue. The facility was falling apart. The walls groaned as the ancient structure gave way, dust and debris collapsing around them. The deep rumbling beneath their feet told Ray that something much bigger was waking beneath the ice, and that terrified him more than anything. They reached the entrance, only to stop dead in their tracks. Outside, the frozen wasteland was no longer empty. A fleet of ships, sleek, black, and not human nor alien, hovered above the ruins. Massive constructs loomed in the sky, their deep blue energy cores pulsing ominously. From the ground, strange mechanical constructs began to rise, crawling out from beneath the ice like insects waking from hibernation. This wasn't just an experiment. This was something far older, something never meant to be found. The war that was never theirs. Ray exhaled sharply. Well, that's new. Zira's hands clenched into fists. I don't recognize those ships. Ray tilted his head. Because they're not yours. And they're not ours. Zira's expression darkened. Then who the hell are they? A sudden boom cracked across the sky as one of the mysterious ships fired a pulse of energy into the ruins. The blast sent a shockwave rippling through the ground, shattering the ice. Ray staggered back, his mind racing. I think we just found the real enemy. Then a voice echoed through the sky. Human. Alien. You were never meant to know the truth. Ray felt a chill crawl up his spine. He exchanged a look with Zira. She had heard it too. Then the ground beneath them collapsed. Into the abyss. Ray didn't even have time to scream. The ice gave way, and he and Zira plummeted into the darkness. For a few heart-stopping moments, all he could hear was the howling wind, the rushing air whipping past him. His vision blurred as he tumbled through the void, cold biting at his skin. Then, impact. Ray hit the ground hard, his breath exploding from his lungs. He rolled, groaning as pain shot through his ribs. His armor had absorbed most of the impact, but his body still felt like it had been slammed against a wall. He coughed, pushing himself up. Zyra. A groan answered him from nearby. He turned, spotting her sprawled across a pile of rubble. She was alive, but she looked just as battered as he felt. She pushed herself up, wincing. Remind me, to kill whoever designed this planet. Ray chuckled weakly. Get in line. Then they looked around, and their breath caught. The heart of the mystery. They had fallen into a vast, ancient chamber. Massive pillars stretched toward the unseen ceiling, their surfaces covered in alien symbols. Strange, bioluminescent veins pulsed through the walls, casting an eerie glow across the chamber. In the center, a massive structure loomed, a monolithic console, still active. Ray exhaled. What the hell is this place? Zyra didn't answer. She was already moving toward the console, her eyes scanning the ancient symbols. Her fingers traced across the surface, and as she did, the glyphs shifted. The room came to life. Holographic displays flickered on. A deep hum vibrated through the air. Then, from the walls, images appeared, faint recordings of the past. Ray and Zyra watched, frozen as the truth unfolded before them. The forgotten betrayal. The recordings showed the colony, before the war. Humans and Zyra's people working together. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, side by side. The project was labeled Genesis, a research initiative meant to create something new. Then the images changed. A third force appeared. Ships, the same ones hovering above the ruins right now. Ray's stomach twisted. No way. The projection showed the attack. It wasn't the humans. It wasn't the aliens. The unknown fleet had destroyed the colony, had turned the two species against each other, had manipulated both sides into believing the other was responsible. The war had been a lie, a fabrication, engineered by a force neither species even knew existed. Zyra's hands clenched into fists. Everything we were told, everything we fought for. She shook her head. It was never about survival. It was about keeping us blind. Ray exhaled sharply. Well, that's officially the worst thing I've ever learned. Then, the voice returned. You should not be here. The room shook. The final battle. The walls split apart, revealing a hidden doorway. From the shadows, they emerged. Not the void crawlers. Not Zyra's people. The true architects of the war. Tall mechanical constructs, their bodies sleek and inhuman, their glowing eyes devoid of emotion. Their weapons hummed with energy. Ray tightened his grip on his rifle. I'm guessing they're not here to chat. Zyra drew her blade. Then we finish this, together. The machines attacked. Ray and Zyra moved as one. Blades clashed. Energy bolts burned through the air. The constructs fought with terrifying precision, their movements calculated and flawless. But Ray and Zyra had fought together before, and they weren't going down without a fight. Ray dodged a plasma blast, rolling beneath a falling pillar. He fired point blank, the shot shattering one of the constructs into pieces. Zyra moved like a storm, her blade tearing through steel, severing limbs, cutting through enemies with deadly efficiency. The battle rage. Then, an opening. Zyra saw it first. The console, the core of the facility, was still active. If they could overload it. Ray, the console. He understood immediately. Ray sprinted toward it, dodging blasts, diving through debris. His hands flew across the controls. System override. Initiate facility shutdown. The walls groaned. The floor shook. The entire structure began to collapse. Ray turned. Zyra, we have to go. Then a construct slammed into him, pinning him down. Zyra's eyes widened. Ray. The construct raised its weapon, and Zira threw herself in the way. The blast hit her full force. Ray screamed. The last thing he saw was the ceiling collapsing. The aftermath. Darkness. Then, air. Ray woke up gasping, cold wind whipping against his face. He was on the surface. The ruins were gone. And beside him, Zira, barely breathing. He grabbed her hand. "Stay with me. Don't you dare." Her eyes fluttered open. She gave him a weak smile. "You're so dramatic." Ray laughed. Then, above them, the sky shifted. The war was over, and the real fight was about to begin.